RetroCode TV.
Sophie, ready to go? Let's go. Hey guys, Josh here with RetroCode TV, and I'm out in the woods today taking my dog for a walk. And I was like, man, this would be a great time just to kind of give my thoughts about the Switch 2, some of the issues I have with it, why I'm disappointed in it, and why actually, as of yesterday, sold my Switch 2. So initially, when I first heard about the Switch 2, I was excited. The Switch 1 was a great system. It had a few issues, mostly that it was underpowered, and I wasn't a big fan of the whole online, social aspect of the Switch 2. I felt it was pretty far behind that of like Sony and Xbox and Steam. But overall, I enjoyed the Switch. I still collect for it. Switch 2 gets announced, and the price, first off, the price kind of gave me pause. It seemed a lot more expensive than it should be. And then I was thinking, you know what, things are more expensive these days. The system itself is much more powerful, so I can justify the price. So for a while, I wasn't going to buy the Switch 2. It's kind of a doubter. Wasn't too enthusiastic about it. Eventually, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and get it, give it a try. I'll stop being a Debbie Downer. And, I was excited for it. Picked it up, and I immediately had some issues. So first thing I really noticed with the Switch 2 was it was bigger, which was nice. I kind of like that size. It's easier on my eyes. But for me, the build quality just felt cheaper. Now, maybe that's because I'm coming from a Switch OLED, but it felt like the plastic was thinner and cheaper. Obviously, the screen was not an OLED screen. It was an LCD or LED screen that could do 120 hertz. But the system overall felt cheaper. The kickstand on the Switch 2, I didn't like how it was not one big solid piece. It was just like a thin little rail, and I felt like that was going to break pretty easy. I started noticing issues. I got my Switch 2, and I know the Switch 2 is still only been out for a few months. Kind of already played the DK and Mario Kart World. So I went to the stores like, I'll see what other games they have available. And I saw Cyberpunk, which was cool, but I already have Cyberpunk, and it's like $70, $80, $70, $80, around that price. I already have Cyberpunk. That game has been out for years. I have it on PS4. I have it on Steam Deck. I got it on Steam Deck recently for like $23, and it runs fine. I saw Yakuza 0. Okay, pretty cool. That one, also $70. That one I also have on Steam Deck. I paid $10 for it. Now, the next issue I ran into, every game I was looking at getting on the Switch 2 was a game key card. And I don't like game key cards. So I think Nintendo has a problem not only with the pricing of their games. Most of the games that they're releasing are remasters or re-releases that you can find on other consoles for much cheaper. Even the most recent Nintendo Direct, it was 70% of the games they showed were re-releases or remasters. And they want top dollar for these games. And these games have been out for years. And on top of that, we don't know how many of these games are going to be game key cards. Which brings me to my next issue with the Switch 2. The Switch 2 came out with 256 gigabytes already on the system. Now that sounds pretty good considering the Switch OLED had 64 gigabytes. But in 2025, 256 gigabytes may be fine for a cell phone. To me, that's the bare minimum you would want on a cell phone. But for a gaming console, 256 gigabytes is nothing. Remember when the PS4 came out and everybody was like, man, 500 gigs, why couldn't they put a terabyte in there? And it wasn't enough, it filled up really quickly. We're in the same situation, except now it's over a decade later? Switch 2 coming out with 256 gigabytes. So normally that may not be an issue. Because, like on the Switch 1, you could play the majority of your games on a cartridge. But guess what? Switch 2, game key cards. That means you're gonna have to download every single one of these games. Majority of the games are game key cards. So that 256 gigs of storage would have been fine if Nintendo made sure that all of their games came out on actual cartridges with the games on the cartridges. With game key cards, you're gonna blow through that storage on your Switch 2 in no time at all. So you're gonna either be stuck uninstalling the games that you have on there just to make room for another one, or you're gonna have to go and buy an SD card to put in your Switch 2, which brings me to the next issue. The Switch 2 uses this ultra fast new SD card. You can't use your regular SD cards. Nintendo kind of created a problem with allowing for these game key cards. And now you have to go and, majority of the games are game key cards, so now you have to go and download the game that you want to play. You put the cartridge in, you download the game. That's going to take up your storage. Now you need more storage. You have to go buy these super expensive, special, fast SD cards to put in your Switch 2. I think the Switch 2 should have came with at least 500 gigabytes of storage, especially if they're going to be doing the game key card thing where you have to download everything. So not only am I not a fan of game key cards just because I like having the actual full game on the cartridge, I don't really trust Nintendo to keep their servers up long enough to allow me to have the peace of mind that I can just download that game later. In 5 years, will my game key card still work? I'm sure it will, but what about in 10 years? I've had my Steam account for, over a decade. All my games are still on there. I can still download them right now and go play them. Nintendo, I don't think, has that kind of track record. Maybe they do, but I just don't trust them. So 256 gigabytes of storage is not enough, especially when all these third-party developers are making use and using the game key cards. I think they should have put 500 gigs, minimum in the Switch 2. And I think they need to incentivize using or having these developers put the game on the actual cartridge and not on a game key card. I can see both sides of it. I can see hey, this is great. This is, it's a way for you to still be able to sell the game if you want and all that. But for me, I'd rather have the physical version of the game because now I'm going to have to use up all the storage on my Switch 2 every time I want to play a game. And it's not cool. And I don't want to go and buy an expensive SD card. And speaking of buying, that gets me to the next issue is the prices. The console was already expensive. And right after they released the Switch 2, they went and raised the prices of the original Switch, the Switch OLED. Everything got more expensive. And Nintendo kind of, passive-aggressively said, hey, the Switch 2 could go up in price as well. So it's they kind of make you want to go ahead and buy the Switch 2 because it may be more expensive in the future. So prices, the game prices are crazy. $79.99, $69.99 for games. And then those games aren't even true physical. Most of them are game key cards. And then if you want to, get the most out of your Switch, you're going to need the expansion pack in order to use any of your social features on the Switch 2. So that's going to be another increased cost. What is that, $45, $50 a year for that? Speaking of the online expansion, the whole user interface of the Switch 2 is almost identical to that of the Switch 1. So, when I spend $450, $500 on a new console, and I get it, and it has the exact same layout, feeling, and everything of the original previous console, kind of annoys me. I want something different, something more intuitive, something more updated. It's like the Switch 1 came out in 2017. You mean to tell me you can't update the user interface? It's still the same. Part of what excited me with the Switch 2 initially was the increased power. They said it was 10 to 13 times more powerful than the original Switch, something like that. I don't remember. It was supposed to be a lot more powerful. And the Nintendo first-party games, they ran great. They looked good. But then games like Cyberpunk, at best, it's running at 40, maybe 50 frames, 45 frames. Cyberpunk came out years ago, 5, 6 years ago? So how is it struggling to run a game that came out 5 or 6 years ago? This is a brand new console. If it's struggling to run Cyberpunk, it can't even hit 60 frames. How is it going to manage to play a lot of these third-party games that are just coming out? Are we going to be in the same situation we were in with the original Switch 1, where like you don't see any of these big AAA games making its way to the Switch 2? Are we going to see Battlefield 6 or the next Call of Duty on the Switch 2? Maybe. But it's struggling to run Cyberpunk. You know, I mean, great. It looks great, sure. But the Switch 2 was advertised as having a 120 hertz screen. I have yet to see any games that I've played hit 120 hertz. It just seems like, I don't know, it's normal for companies to kind of, you know, make up and boast about their console's power and how powerful it is and stuff, but like, how are you gonna have games came out 5-6 years ago and still not hit 60 frames? That's crazy. And then I hear about the new Elden Ring coming out on the Switch 2, struggling to hit like 20 frames. It's like, what is going on? Now, some of that may be that Nintendo has not sent out proper or enough development kits to these companies. So, you know, maybe they're just very early versions of the game that we're seeing, but something's up. Elden Ring, yeah, it's an intensive game. It's not fully optimized, but a Switch 2, given the hardware that's in it, should be able to play Elden Ring no problem, not get 20 frames. That's crazy. My Steam Deck plays it. I get like 40 frames on my Steam Deck. So like I mentioned earlier, I didn't really have too many first-party Switch games to play because I refused to buy a game key card. I already played Mario Kart World, DK Bonanza. So I was like, okay, I'll play my Switch 1 library. I tried Chronicles of the Wolf on Switch 2. Doesn't work properly. It's got weird flicker effects. My buddy Nate, he told me about this as well. So then I try Republic Commando. I was at the store the other day, about 2 weeks ago. I bought the Episode 1 Racer and Republic Commando bundle. I was like, man, this is a great bundle. I like both of those games. Tried Republic Commando, the game, you can't play it. It's got a camera bug. Makes the game completely unplayable on the Switch 2. And when you go to look for that game in the Switch eShop, it's blacked out. It says that there's a glitch with it. So, are they going to release updates for these games? Probably not. Maybe they will. So the games that do work for my Switch 1 library, that do work on the Switch 2, they run better. I would say they don't have as much slowdown. But at least the ones I've played, aside from Zelda, they don't have any new texture packs, new, you know, upped resolution or anything. They're basically just running like they did before with less dips. Except now, on a 1080p screen, and that original 720p, you know, image is getting stretched to 1080p, so it looks worse. Plays better, looks worse. But then, you know, with the Switch 1, it would, you know, it would have, you know, dynamic resolution, and the resolution would dip. I remember, what game was it? Green Hell would get down to like 360p at one point. So, I'm a little disappointed. Some of the games do work better on the Switch 2. It's very inconsistent, and I feel like it was kind of half-baked. And I also haven't heard from Nintendo about if they're going to fix these issues with backwards compatibility, or are they just done with it? I don't know. Nintendo has a communication problem, among other things. So yeah, they really need to come out and say what their plan is with backwards compatibility. Are they going to release patch notes or patches for games and keep us updated? Or are they just going to leave it like it is? I don't know. Are they going to, you know, require that the game developers for those games go in and fix it? Because to me, it seems like the Switch 2 is emulating Switch 1 games. So if a game isn't emulating properly, without me knowing too much about the tech stuff, I would assume that Nintendo would need to fix their emulator to be more compatible with these games and not force the developers individually to go in and find ways to make their games work on Nintendo Switch's emulator. Because if that's the case, I don't think these games are going to get, you know, they're not going to get patches. Why would a game that came out 5-6 years ago that's not working properly on the Switch 2, why would a developer go in and spend money and time to fix that? I don't think they will. If there's a reoccurring feeling I get anytime I mess with my Switch 2 or look into things with the Switch 2 is I feel like I'm being nickeled and dimed. The system was more expensive. The games are more expensive. To get full functionality out of the system, to play with your friends and video chat and all that, you have to buy the online expansion pack for the Switch. Everything's more expensive. And then Nintendo talks about, maybe it'll be more expensive in the future. Tariffs and market conditions. It's all BS. Nintendo has been making a fortune. They could absorb some of these prices for their consumers, but they won't. So then I watched the recent Nintendo Direct, and we mentioned it earlier, mostly all re-releases and remasters. There's a couple of new games. Nothing I'm really gonna run out to buy, nothing exciting to me. The Nintendo Direct was the final nail in the coffin for me. I went ahead and I watched that the same night. I talked to Nate. I went ahead and put my Switch up for sale. Maybe in 2 years, 2 years, when, Nintendo will release the OLED model. Maybe by then, they'll have a bigger library. The system will be nicer. And it might be worth buying by then. Maybe they'll have the whole game keycard thing figured out. But right now, it's not worth it. I do have buyer's remorse. Luckily I was able to sell mine. Got a pretty good deal on it. I did lose out on it, obviously. But, I'm glad I'd rather have that money. I have my Steam Deck and my Switch OLED. I didn't find anything I was playing on the Switch 2. I was playing Switch 1 games on the Switch 2, the ones that work. So why am I paying $500+ for a Switch 2 when I could just play my Switch 1 games? And now I'm playing it on my Switch OLED. They look better. They function like they're supposed to. I don't know. I feel like Nintendo's really dropping the ball this time. I don't know. I know the Switch OLED was like I know that the Switch 2 was like the fastest selling console of all time. But that was because the Switch 1 was so successful. And also because Nintendo went out of their way to make sure they had proper inventory this time around, so they could sell that many consoles at launch. And I think that's what it was. I think people are getting buyer's remorse. Switch 2 is not living up to, the Switch 1. I know I'm not impressed with it. I sold it. They announced the Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 coming out, $70. Now, it's another thing is like that's coming out for the Switch 1. I don't know if it's coming out for the Switch 2. I've only seen the Switch 1 version advertised, like the case for it. I didn't see a red case. So if it's also available on the Switch 2, which I heard it is it just going to be one of those you have to buy the Switch 1 version and then get the free upgrade to the, Switch 2 version digitally? I feel like I don't know what Nintendo wants. Do they want us to buy a Switch 2, or do they want us to keep our Switch 1? Do they want both? It seems like, I don't know, the Virtual Boy, that was announced. $100 for that little case that the Switch slides into, the Switch 2 can slide into. Apparently it's also compatible with the Switch 1. That's great if you're a Switch 1 user, but kind of sucks if you're a Switch 2, person that bought the Switch 2 and you want exclusives for the Switch 2. They're not giving you very many reasons to upgrade to the Switch 2. The prices are high. There's not very many games. The games that are there, most of them are game key cards. You don't actually get the physical version. Like I mentioned earlier, Nintendo has a communication problem, and I think this is part of it. So quick rundown, summarization of everything. Sold my Switch 2, wasn't impressed with it. Don't like the prices of the games or the console. Don't like that the games are mostly all game key cards. I mean, you don't actually get the physical game. It's a download. I don't like that the Switch 2 has so little storage, and yet almost all the games make you download the game. I don't like that if you need more storage, you have to buy these super expensive new SD cards. Who releases a console in 2025 with 256 gigs of storage? Fine for a cell phone, not fine for a game console. the Switch 2 seems to be struggling as far as running these games. Shouldn't be struggling to run Cyberpunk or games that are several years old. Should be able to run those no problem, and should be able to be ready to run the new games coming out from third-party developers. I don't know. It's a bad look when your brand new $500 console can't get 60 frames on Cyberpunk. And that's a game that CD Projekt Red, they do a great job porting their games. And even they could only get the game to hit 40 and 45 frames. Handheld. Now, I don't know about docked mode. I don't really play my Switches docked, hardly ever. So, backwards compatibility, hit and miss at best. Works great sometimes, doesn't work at all sometimes. Lack of communication from Nintendo. If this is going to get better, are they going to fix this? On Steam, if a game doesn't work, there's community notes, and you can usually track the progress and see, you know, what does work, what doesn't work, when will it work, things like that. Another issue, now it hasn't plagued me or got me yet, but remember the Joy-Con drift issue that was such a huge ordeal with the original Switch? Apparently, same technology is in the Joy-Cons in the Switch 2, which means we're going to get the same issues of the joystick drift. I haven't had that issue, and I sold mine, so I won't, but I have seen other reports of people having that issue. It's like, man, what are they doing? Nintendo has an issue where they don't listen to their fans. And that's nothing new. They've been like that for years. But I feel like they're just dropped the ball with this system. I feel like I'm getting nickeled and dimed for everything. And yeah, they have some games coming up, but almost all of those games you can get elsewhere for cheaper. It's like, where's the incentive? And a lot of the games they have coming up can run on your Switch 1. Where's the incentive to switch to the Switch 2? Not impressed. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section. I had a lot more going on in my mind with the Switch 2. Can't really seem to remember right now. Those are my main issues though. What are your thoughts? Do you have buyer's remorse with the Switch 2? I do. I got rid of mine. Maybe in a year to 2 years when they release the OLED model, which you know they will. Maybe then it'll be worth buying. As of right now, it's not worth it, and I wish I had not bought mine initially. At least I was able to sell it. But I don't know. Just kind of disappointed with Nintendo. They did great with the Switch 1. I just feel like they're every possible way they can misstep with the Switch 2. I feel like they are misstepping. So thank you guys for watching. If you made it to the end of this video, just, you know, let me know. Say, hey, I made it. Anyways, we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.